Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
My name is Dan.
and we're here joining you after the Game Week 24 Boxing Day fixtures to look at a couple of the key points and answer your questions ahead of uh, another game week on Friday. To timestamp this, we are recording on Wednesday night, the 27th. Um, And Dan, first things first, how are you?
Very good, Angus. Luton won back-to-back games, um, so maybe got a chance of staying up. Um, Fantasy-wise, a couple of weird game weeks. I played follow the leader, didn't go too great. Got a small green arrow, and then this game week, I basically got rid of Whitaker for a hit. So yeah, a small red arrow this week. But I think long term, I think my transfers will work. I think.
Yeah, it was an interesting couple of game weeks. I played follow the leader as well. Thought it was going great after the Leeds game with Somerville vice captain and Spence. Um, got sabotaged by Leicester against Rotherham. Uh, Dewsbury Hall, Mavididi and Fatawu basically doing nothing. On the emergency captain, I had Whitaker and Azaz, which obviously went great. And then that was another green arrow, but it was a bit underwhelming as an overall score. And then uh, this game week another green arrow, so it's 87 -4 this week. Got Adam Armstrong back, which was lovely. Vice captained him, 2 assists, top bonus. Um, I still had Whitaker. I bought Callum O'Hare, who didn't do anything this week, but I'm happy to have him for the next few games and then reassess. Um, and I had obviously Mavididi, Dewsbury Hall, Walker Peters, Davis, O'Leary, all chipping in. Even Spence with 4, Captain Somerville for a blank, and I had Rutter. But yeah, another green arrow. I'm up to 132nd now, so uh, the big
Yeah,
rise
caught up with me.
continues. After game week 24, I'm 132nd. After game week 21, I was 878th. So it's been nice. And yeah, happy, much happier, obviously, having Adam Armstrong back in as well at the end of that. So I think that sort of helps. Potentially looking at a role this week, which would be lovely. Um, so, uh, so yeah, all things going well at the moment. We'll obviously get into our key points from the game week shortly.
Should I go over my score, Angus?
Yeah, yes.
It's all right.
I thought you didn't
I
want to
did.
talk about it.
I mean, I'm gonna have to. 73 -4. I brought in Rutter and Armstrong and got rid of Whitaker and Broadhead. Um, I kept Chaplin, and I didn't feel it was a wise idea to get rid of both Ipswich. So I thought getting rid of Whitaker would be the better move. Not so this week. Um, uh, Johansson subbed in goal for 7. Um, Walker Peters 8. Vestergaard 4. Davis 7. I captained Somerville for 8. Dewsbury Hall 5. Mavididi 11. Probably my 50-50 call was playing Azaz or Bellingham. And then Azaz didn't start, which was a bit annoying because he only got 1 and Bellingham got 5. Uh, Rutter 2, vice captain Daniel Armstrong, and Chaplin 2. So yeah, not ideal. Like I said, a small red arrow, but it's only like 9 places. And like I said, I feel like I'm in a good position to probably roll again. I do have Cannon and Kessler Hayden, which I'm not overly happy about having as the options, but I think I think I've taken -4 for about 4 or 5 game weeks in a row. I'd like to roll and maybe do a couple of free transfers, but yeah, um, still haven't decided when I'm going to play my last boost, but that'll probably be right at the end, and it'll be Jeepers Keepers or midfield dynamos.
Yeah, I haven't sort of made any concrete plans for the final boost. I sort of want to see how, particularly how game week 29 shapes up. I mean, I was writing off playing a boost in this period anyway, personally. So the fact that I sort of, not I wasn't going to play one for 3 game weeks, I think, made it quite easy to sort of wait and see. Um, yeah, and then just sort of see how it goes. Um, but yeah, I don't have the pod team in front of me, but I know we won in Thursday Night Wars this week, which is the main thing. So yeah, I can't even tell you what we did in that because I can't remember.
Got O'Haring, didn't
Yes,
we?
we did.
So that
Um,
didn't go well, did
but yeah, so that's sort of how we did. So before we get to our key points, we'll cover the key team news from this week. So over to you for that.
Yeah, there's not too much key news this week. For QPR, Cook and Powell weren't in the squad. Cannon and Willock were benched. For Plymouth, Edwards, Azaz, and Mumba were benched. Kesaheda started. For Coventry, Godden was in up front for Sims. Blackburn, Smodic started. Obviously, he missed the last game week. For Hull, Ingram is in goal. Sunderland, Shelts in for Huggins. Dak was up front. For Borough, Glover was in goal, so Dieng's injured. Rogers played the 10 and Siviera played up front. Southampton, they had Stevens played, so it was sort of I don't think it was a back five. It seemed
No,
like
Walker
it
Peters
pushed.
played right wing.
Yeah, that's what it looked like with the heat map. Manning was back in. It looked I think Bree might be injured. Um, for Watford, Andrews was back in at right back, but then got subbed at half time. They keep trying to do this Deli Bashiru thing at right back, which apparently is not working. Stoke Hoover played left back. Um, what pronounce the new right back? Do you know how to pronounce the Stoke right? Sh-
Chamadou.
Sh- Shamadi, yeah. He was highly rated last year at, I think, Colchester.
Yeah.
And if he keeps in the side, he is eligible for Budget Buster at 4.9. Ipswich harness him for Broadhead. Very lucky boy. I'm sure we'll get into that. And Leicester Daka was still up front. That's
Yeah.
basically it, Angus.
Yeah, no, I did sort of think there might be a chance that he dropped out, but obviously he did keep his place there. Um, but yeah, so think that's there's some interesting stuff there. I think some of it is self-explanatory, particularly with the condensed games. Um, obviously we had certain things like James Justin being left out. Given that it's been their policy to leave him out in the middle game of 3 game weeks, that game effectively acted as that. So that sort of thing was obvious. But yeah, I'm sure we'll cover some of it in terms of both in terms of questions and in terms of sort of points for us. But first things first, we're going to cover a couple of key points. The first one is talking about Southampton. So I think we have talked about Southampton previously, but I think it's definitely time to talk about them again. They're unbeaten in 16 games now. 11 of those 16 have been wins. They obviously had a big win against Swansea at the weekend, 5-0. Things are really sort of clicking for them. The key for them as well is they're getting contributions whenever someone comes into the team. Like, I mean, Joe Ari-Bow's come in for the last, I think, 4 games, and he's made a difference when, Stuart Armstrong came back into the team, when Adozie has come into the team. All of these players are sort of making contributions when they're coming into the team. And I think that's sort of makes a big difference. When you've got a team playing well, and it's almost that just relentlessness of it doesn't matter if they lose a few players, they're just going to keep going. Bree came into the team. He obviously went off injured, I think, at the weekend and was out of the Boxing Day game, and will miss the next 2 as well, at least. But Manning comes back in. Manning does a job. Stevens plays right back. He does a job. All this sort of thing. And I think from a Gaffr point of view, a lot of people have been on Adam Armstrong. A lot of people have been on Kyle Walker-Peters. And I think part of it as well is it's just then interesting that people are going to start working out. I mean, I'm sure both of us are in a similar position, who the other Southampton assets are. And when you've got a team that's playing like this, they've got a decent run still to come as well. It's just natural to look to pile into those teams. But first, Dan, what have been your sort of thoughts over Southampton in this period?
It's weird. I've known they've been on a good run. Um, I mentioned to you the other day that it feels like they've sort of gone under the radar in a weird way because everyone's just been focusing on Leicester, Ipswich, Leeds, and for so long, if anyone was going to catch Ipswich, it was going to be Leeds. And then I had a look at the table and I was like, hang on a minute, Southampton are like above above Leeds now on a massive run. Um, and we said at the start of the season that it will take Martin some time.
Yeah,
He had to mix, obviously trying to see which of his players were going to be at the club. Like, let's not forget, James Ward-Prowse played the first game. Yeah, still had Teller there and players like that. So they were trying to learn a system when half the players weren't going to be there. Um, and I think they've finally found a system, um, and it's basically plug and play. I know they do some things where Armstrong will go up front or he'll play on the right, and there has been some changes as you mentioned, in midfield and on the wings. They seem quite settled. Bednarek and Harwood Bellis are their centre backs. Walker Peters is 100% going to play. Um, it seems like Stuart Armstrong is now one of the first players on the team sheet. Um, I think Flynn Downs plays a lot most of
yeah,
the games
yeah,
as
yeah. He's
well,
sort of that deeper midfielder.
and then Armstrong got a solid base, and they've all learned the system now. And whereas that in these tight games, they will win the game through a bit of magic or a clinical finish from Armstrong, and that's the difference. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
yeah, and I
I've
think
been
it's
thinking.
interesting. For those who I would will just acknowledge for those you know, not or who have been watching or listening, Dan won't be aware. There was a temporary issue on my end, so there's very little bit lost in the middle of what you were saying there, but I think people will still get the picture. Um,
People will probably be happy about it, to be
I
honest.
think it's interesting when you think about some of the players that we thought were going to be important and you would think would be important in a run like this for Southampton haven't really featured that much. Like you think about someone like Che Adams. I know he's chipped in with a couple of goals, but like hasn't really been involved. In fact, someone like Alcaraz has been less involved in
Yeah.
for a few of these games, and it hasn't really mattered. And I think that's where it's interesting. Um, but in terms of sort of the assets. I mean, I know we're going to sort of tell everyone to get Walker Peters and Armstrong and Adam Armstrong. After him, where would be the first places that you would be looking?
I think probably Stuart Armstrong. I think he's on some of the set pieces. Um, 7.6 as well is quite a nice price. He's
Yeah.
not premium. He's sort of mid-range where he could be your fourth midfielder quite comfortably. Um, yeah, it's tricky because I know Adozi has looked good the last few games, but is he 100% nailed? I'm not convinced. And defensively, you'd probably have to go for a centre back, I think, but I'm not sure. 6-1. I don't know. I think Stuart Armstrong would be the place I would go if I was going to add a third.
Yeah, I think the key one there is obviously um, Sulemana is likely to go to AFCON.
Yeah,
So that potentially helps someone like Adozi. The other thing is obviously, as I said earlier, we know Bree's going to be out of the next couple. He's due to have another scan on, I think it's a hamstring issue. And if he's sort of ruled out for a little while, then obviously Ryan Manning comes right back on the table. Um, is sort of the other sort of thing that sort of jumps to mind there. Stuart Armstrong, yeah, and he had started sharing some of the set pieces with Bree as well. So the fact that Bree is out, I mean, I know he'll share
yeah,
some of them with Manning as well, but he's clearly sort of the primary taker, is the primary direct free kick taker. So I think that helps. Um, we were talking beforehand. Really like Joe Ari-Bow and the fact that he's now getting a run in the team. I think it's helpful. He can play in the midfield three or in sort of the attacking areas. He's had to bide his time. Actually, today, Wednesday, there were some comments from Martin about how he's appreciated the way he's approached it. There have been times where they've had sort of disagreements over it, but it hasn't affected Ari-Bow's sort of work rate throughout or anything like that. Um, and I know Southampton fans coming into the season would have quite happily seen the back of him. But if he keeps putting in performances like he has done in the last few, I think that will obviously turn around. So I think he's potentially interesting, particularly that little saving. I think he's 6.7. Um,
yeah,
so I think he could be a nice option there. Um, I personally would rather not go with a centre back, just because I think with all these interesting options, it almost feels like a waste to go with one of the centre backs. I think the first call would be Stuart Armstrong, but I do like Adozi and Ari-Bow. And I guess we do have to acknowledge, because he keeps returning, Ryan Fraser.
a lot of the time that's off the bench. He scored a lot of. I can remember a couple of winners earlier on in the season. So I think he's more. They use him more as an impact player.
Yeah, but you do just have to sort of mention him because he does keep returning. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at a couple of things like in terms of just, if you look at their attacking returns, obviously Adam Armstrong has 21. The next player is Che Adams with 7.
Yeah,
So I think it shows, like, obviously it is heavily Adam Armstrong in attack. Um, but yeah, I do like sort of those midfield options, and I think Ryan Manning is very much one if Bree is ruled out for any length of time. It's there's not much in the stats that points to anyone that's a regular starter. Because I
yeah,
think some of these guys that are looking good on some of the underlying stats are the ones who are coming on often when the initial damage has already been done, and um, you know making the most of it, like Sekou Mara, Ryan Fraser, people like that. So I wouldn't necessarily be advising them. Um, but yeah, I think that was sort of a long-winded way of saying, yeah, Southampton have a bunch of good assets. But I think it is interesting in some ways, in that I think someone has to be really brave to go without Walker Peters or Armstrong at this point.
Yeah, well, I haven't had Armstrong for a while
Yeah,
because I've been, planning with Budget Buster and Follow the Leader, and it's not been very nice.
no,
I'll tell you that.
no, it made me feel much better when I had him. And obviously, the last couple of times I've had him, he's blanked, and then I've sold him and everything. So to bring him back and him actually reward me, it's like, maybe my luck really has turned this season. um, but yeah, and so I think then it's almost like even those little things like the midfielders, it might just come into how much your sort of money in the bank or who you're looking to replace. Like in terms of Stuart Armstrong versus a Dozy, that sort of thing. It might
Yeah.
literally be about price, or whether you then go with someone like Manning because of the, shortage of defenders, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, certainly they look really good at the moment. It's clicking nicely. They're not losing many to AFCON. I think the only two that are likely to go are actually Joe Ari-Bow and Sulemana,
Yeah.
which probably helps the cases of both Stuart Armstrong and Edozie. But yeah, I mean, next four: Plymouth home, Norwich away, Sheffield Wednesday home, Swansea away. That's still a very nice
Goals in there,
run.
isn't it? Let's be honest.
And that takes you up to 29, where they might or might not be playing. But even then, the four after that: Hull home, Rotherham away, Huddersfield home, Bristol City away. Like the run could carry on for a little while. I mean, they'll probably drop one in there. Just it's the way it happens.
It's normally Rotherham, isn't it?
Especially because they're away.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's just sort of highlighting them and talking about some of their options. Not that people probably need to be told that Southampton are good at this point, but maybe they do. Uh,
Well, I obviously did because I hadn't noticed it.
yeah, well, I thought it was quite funny. I was
Zooming
saying,
up to
I think it was when they were talking about it before the Ipswich Leicester game, but also after the Leeds Ipswich game, they were talking about sort of Leeds' gap to Ipswich, ignoring that Southampton's gap to Ipswich was exactly the same, and then obviously Southampton won to get closer, but it was like they were
that
just
sounds
lower on
very
goal
familiar.
difference.
That sounds very familiar to last year when they were talking about Middlesbrough and Sheffield United, and then Luton just finished third.
um, so yeah, so that's sort of Southampton. That was sort of the main point we wanted to cover at this point. For our second point, we're just going to do something a
Looking
little bit
forward to this.
different. I think particularly with these quick turnarounds, there's only so much we can get into these teams and particular games and all this sort of thing. So I decided, and Dan decided it was a good idea just to do this. We're going to look ahead to the transfer window and what we think teams need. Obviously, it's the 27th of December. Next week the transfer window will be open. And so we just thought we'd have a little look at what we think teams need. We haven't compared notes beforehand, so we might come up with the same thing. We might come up with different things. Some teams will talk about obviously more than others, whether that's because of the lack of needs or it's less interesting. Like, let's be honest, it's going to be less interesting to talk about what Leicester might need from the transfer window, for example. But yeah, so we'll get into it now. The first one we've got is Birmingham. I know this is one that I know Dan has something for, so I'm just going to throw it to you first to cover that because I'm sure it will spin off that.
Let's say they need a new manager.
Where it's quite funny because as a player, I wasn't fond of Wayne Rooney. I could acknowledge he was a talented player, but I feel like I've become a bit of a Wayne Rooney defender as a manager. And part of it, I think, is it was an awkward time to bring him in. We've discussed it, particularly in terms of where they were in the table, and the fact that he clearly wanted to play a different style, and they were bringing him in at such a point where, in terms of bringing players in to potentially play that style, it was gonna be a little while. And I think we've seen that with some of the players struggling. Some of the players have adapted better than others. Um, so I would push back a little bit on that, but I know there's there are people out there who are like, no, they need to change again. Um,
I think if the owners wanted to do this, why didn't they just go in the summer and just say, Eustace, that's it, we're hiring Rooney. He could have then brought in players he wanted that will fit the system. They've sort of either got to admit they're wrong or they've just got to stick with him and let him sign players in
yeah,
January.
and I'm pretty sure they're going to do the latter. To answer your
Yeah.
question there, I think they had to wait for the MLS season to end.
I
Um,
mean, just buy him out of his
yeah.
contract.
Um, well, I think for a long time they were in the race for the playoffs, and I think he was quite keen to sort of see that through, particularly with the chance to do something there. So once they were out of the playoff race, the move happened. But yeah, I think they will probably back him. In terms of players, not specific players, like some of these I might have a specific player for, but I think they need a centre
Oh, I
back.
haven't gone that one.
No, but I think I'll come
Yeah,
up with some. They need another centre
yeah.
back. Um,
That would probably be the position I would have said.
yeah. Um, I think like Sanderson has made a couple of errors recently, but I think generally speaking, he's still a good option in there. I think Mark Roberts is trying, bless him, but particularly in a playing out from the back style, I'm not sure Mark Roberts is the player you want there really.
So I think he should probably be fourth choice centre back. Really, let's if
Yeah, I mean obviously they've had the likes of Kevin Long out injured, which hasn't helped. Which speaking of their injuries, they might need another fullback in. Laird is injured again. Drame is injured. Buchanan, I'm less concerned about because that was a head injury, so it's just the
yeah,
compulsory
he'll be
missing the
back.
game and whatever. Like he might miss this weekend's game as well, just because of the concussion protocol. Um, but it's just they might need additional cover in there because can you really rely on Ethan Laird at this point? Like, um, and I thought maybe sort of an additional player in the wide areas. I like Dembele, I like Miyoshi, but then you're immediately getting into like Ollie Burke. So it's maybe an
Yeah.
additional player there, but
Well, what about striker? I know they've got Stansfield, who's obviously number one, but they've got Hogan. His time's ending at
yeah,
there. Djukovic is a good different option. I can
yeah.
accept that.
You basically need him still as the third option, and you basically need to replace Hogan as the second option.
Yeah.
Um, if they could do that, then great. I think Stansfield obviously is perfectly fine as a number one, but they could probably do with another striker in there. So in terms of painting the picture, like, I think some of these will be helped by a couple of players coming back. Like I'm talking about wide players. I mean, Keshi Anderson was back in the squad on Boxing Day. I think
Oh
we'd
well,
both forgotten he was still there,
I
but
did. Well, I mentioned it
yeah.
in our chat, didn't we?
But I think that sort of thing will probably make a difference to them in that sort of area. Um, I refuse to say that Tyler Roberts' return helps anything. But yeah, so maybe that will help. But centre back certainly, I think is the most glaring need.
Yeah.
And they might. I know John Ruddy has tried his best with this new system, and he's talked about sort of, he's done better than I thought he would, and he's talked about sort of really working at it. But they might want to get another keeper in there. Um, we've seen some of these teams that want to play this style, making a signing to help them out with that. Like I think, for example, even just as a loan move, could they get someone like Muric from Burnley um, to potentially do that? Um, but yeah, clearly at least a couple of players needed there. Next up, we've got Blackburn. I didn't have a lot in this because part of it is just injured players back.
For me, it's a striker.
Yeah,
It's obvious.
yeah.
I
Like
I know
I don't think the injured
Sammy
players coming
Smollick's
back. I
not.
don't think Sam Gallagher helps that.
Yeah, Ennis is still up in the air. I think if the striker's key, they're doing well creating XG. I know Smodics has done well.
Yeah,
Um, I think it would make him a better attacking side if he was in the 10. It's a striker for me.
yeah. I think the striker is the main one. It's quite clear. Um, because, like I say, I think we've said for a long time on this, Sam Gallagher's not the answer. He has many admirable qualities, but he's not the answer at striker. Um, I also think with some of the issues they've had, maybe one more fullback. They've been pressed into playing the likes of
Maybe
Hill at right
left
back,
back.
where it's just
Maybe a left back.
Travis at right back and that sort of thing, where it's just like they've got Pickering and they've got Britain. Ranking Costello's obviously out at the moment.
Yeah. I'm not. I think that's just a bit unlucky, isn't it?
Yeah,
Most players only have two per position. I think the weird thing is they've got Britain, but he's not playing at right back.
yeah.
He's sometimes played as a wing. So
But I
yeah.
think maybe they could do with one more fullback was the other thing, just in terms of that
Mm.
that squad depth element. Um, Bristol City.
I really I think I'd probably go centre mid, but
Yeah, I think they're
I
struggling
think
with
that's
some of the
harsh,
some of the
maybe.
bodies in there. I think they're doing a job, but when they've got a number of sort of older players in there, you've got Joe Williams and Matty James, and I mean Andy King is injured, but when it's some of these older players that you're relying on a little bit, maybe just someone who can play slightly more reliably week in week out. I know those players have sort of played, but um,
I know they're impressed with Gardner Hickman. He's
yeah,
done well, and they're playing Jason Knight basically as a 10.
yeah. Um, yeah, because the only other thing I had was I think a couple of these injured players back would make a real difference to them. Like I think Ross McCrory, who I think is now finally over the issues that have plagued him and starting to work his way back. You look at a couple of even the depth issues that you could
Naismith.
maybe highlight with them. If someone like him comes back, that obviously solves it. So I think it's almost in some ways easy for them in terms of what they need to address. I know Naki Wells is almost back, but I thought maybe another striker. Like I know they've got other players who can play there. It's not sort of saying, oh yeah, because I do like Conway, but it's just sort of another sort of out and out striker possibly.
Yeah,
Um,
but you say that, but then they've got um, Wells coming back. They've got Cornick. They've got Bell. I'm
Yeah,
not
but
sure
most
it's
most
needed.
like someone like Cornick, Bell, even Vyman, they're primarily used from sort of non-striker areas, like sort of out wide or whatever.
Yeah,
So it's just sort of thinking, do they want sort of another number 9 in? But I think if Wells is back, even that is probably solved really.
yeah.
Cardiff.
I put goalkeeper. Like, what is going on in that position? Like,
I was
they
thinking
brought
about
in.
what you said on our last pod about whether there's any expectation on playing time from Runnison. I don't think so, in part because I keep seeing comments from Bullet and he seems to really believe in Runnison. And I'm like, I don't know why. Because I've never seen anything from him that makes me believe in him. I think if I think if you just picked Jack Annick and stuck with it, they'd
Yeah,
be fine.
it's weird with Cardiff because I think they've done so well. Like, I was expecting them to be
Mm.
near the bottom. Like, I'm not sure. I know they've been linked with maybe Kiefer Moore, and that would be a good signing. But like they've improved that centre back. They've done well in centre mid. They address those positions in the summer. They've got a number of wingers. Like, maybe it is that striker position.
Yeah, I mean, for them, I said goalkeeper question mark. But I think, they could just pick Alec and stick with him. This was one where I had a specific player because I just said Kiefer Moore.
Yeah, it's been linked, isn't he?
Yeah. And like Bullet has talked about it, I think, on multiple occasions. Um, and so I sort of said Kiefer Moore. Um, maybe another left back because Collins is going to go to AFCON and O'Dowda still isn't back. So they
Yeah,
probably
maybe.
need someone for that position, even if it's just sort of loan cover. I know they've talked about bringing back Joel Bagan, who's been out on loan, but they probably need cover in that position as well. Coventry, what have you got for them?
Winger.
Yeah,
They've changed formation. I think they started wanting to play three at the back, and they've moved to wingers. They're playing Haji Wright there, and Sakamoto is suiting Sakamoto.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's a winger for me.
yeah. I said a winger and maybe one more in the middle of the park. Like you've got a couple of these players that will be injury issues, sort of Kelly, Sheaf, um,
Um,
Allen at times as well. So I thought maybe one more in the middle of the park.
yeah. Did they replace Hamer? They didn't, did they?
Not really, no.
Because he played the first few games, didn't he?
Yeah, and I know Casey Palmer is sort of there, but again, we're talking about
It's
injury
Casey
doubts.
Barber.
Oh, they brought in Ayari, didn't they? Who was sort of,
Yeah,
so maybe it's just more of him. I don't know, but just thinking maybe another player in the middle of the park.
yeah. I think winger is
Yeah.
the obvious one.
Huddersfield.
Striker.
You
They
don't
need to
you don't
score
like
goals.
Bergzorg? Scored again at the
He's all
weekend.
right. He's all right, isn't he? But you got Danny Ward.
Yeah, I think they
I
could do with
I
another one
actually
either way. Like what? Because they've been playing two up top at times, and it's sort of like, yeah, you could do with another striker. I think.
I, I heard rumours they might call Jordan Rhodes. He's doing
Yeah,
well for Blackpool.
yeah, of course. Um, I'm not sure that would be the solution, but that I suppose that is an option for them. The other thing I had for them that they might run into at this point is goalkeeper cover.
Nichols injured, isn't he?
Nichols is injured. Maxwell came off on Boxing Day injured as well, so they might need goalkeeper cover.
They saved that for a double game week, didn't they?
Yeah,
And then we've got to just add about four goalies that
yeah,
they would call back
exactly.
from loan.
And then I said maybe someone at right back.
Possibly, yeah. They
Um,
need to spend some money
I think they
because they're at
struggle a
risk
little
of
bit with
going
that
down.
side. Like I think at the weekend they were playing like Kasumu at right wing back or whatever. So um,
Yeah, it's not ideal,
yeah,
is it?
possibly someone on that side. Hull,
Left back.
yeah,
But they got Vinagre. I know they play
Greaves out there.
Reeves out there, Greaves out there. Yeah, they just seem a bit short of defensive options.
Yeah, and Vinagre is injured, and I think he's had a setback. Um,
Yeah,
I know Danny McDonald wants them to
say
sign four or
goalkeeper.
five players. Goalkeeper is obviously one that is standing out. I said at least one fullback because Cyrus Christie can basically only play an attack at this point. You've got Louis Coyle, but the way he plays, he seems to injure himself often enough that you probably need someone there. And then potentially left back, yeah, but just so it's like at least one fullback. And I said maybe one more wide player.
Maybe, yeah,
Like
yeah.
they don't necessarily need to sort of, it's not a desperate need, but I thought, a lot of the time, both just in terms of give the ball to Philogene, but also him being the only really sort of the real wide outlet. It's like maybe get another one in. I know Delap has sort of done well, often playing from the right, but it might be more effective if you can get him through the middle with another actual sort of wide player. Um, so that was sort of the things for Hull. Ipswich.
Striker.
Yeah, they probably need one now with like just to play some sort of role. Obviously, Dane Scarlett's gone back to Tottenham.
Also, oh, I forgot his name. The backup striker, not Hurst. He's done actually better than I
Ladapo.
thought he would. Yeah, it's rumored he's going
Yeah,
to
you've got
League One.
Ladapo and you've got Caden Jackson, and it's like you
Yeah,
probably need a little bit better than that.
I think so. They
Um,
don't need much.
no,
Maybe a
they've
centre
been
back.
linked with Stansfield. I saw. I don't think that really makes sense for anyone. Because Fulham sent him out to be playing regularly. Otherwise, he'd be at Fulham. He probably would have got some minutes for them. So I
Yeah,
don't think going to Ipswich really benefits them or him. And obviously, it'd be good for Ipswich, but I think they need someone who's probably slightly more comfortable being a backup, playing every second or coming on relatively regularly, but maybe starting every like third game or something. So I think that sort of that's a potential issue. Um, Also, maybe one more fullback. I haven't, particularly on the right hand side. I haven't necessarily been in love with either of the players out there, but
they're not. They're not going to do that.
no,
They've got two already, are
yeah.
they? I can't see
Um,
it.
but yeah, backup striker was the main one I mentioned, and maybe one more body in the middle of midfield.
What
Um,
about centre back?
Perhaps because they've got what, three of them.
They've probably got. Have they still got a youngster as well? Young centre back.
Baggett.
Yeah, they
Um,
might want to get him minutes down the
yeah,
league.
so maybe another centre back in there because I think really they've got sort of Wolfenden, Twanzebe, and Burgess. So maybe one more
Yeah.
centre back for them. Um, Leeds,
Left back.
yeah,
It's
it's
obvious.
just I could have stopped
Get
writing after
Spence
left
on the
back.
right. Get Spence on the right.
Yeah. I also said maybe another either centre mid or attacking mid, maybe one who can play but either. In part because they clearly don't have players they really like in there, and they're going to risk running Ampadu and Kamara into the ground. I know they
Yeah,
were
but
linked with
if they
Amiri in the summer, maybe from I forget which Bundesliga club he's at, but he might be the answer. Just going back in for him.
what I say though is if they get a left back, they move Spence to right back. He likes Archie Grays. That can
Yeah.
be your cover.
Yes, of course.
So
Um, Leicester.
said don't bother, save your money.
Yeah, I said maybe one more wide player
Maybe right. I don't think they
because
need it
they're
though.
just slightly light there. They've obviously got sort of Akgun who can come in, although they use him at times as in sort of the one of the eight roles. But it just I know Daka, someone like
Got
Daka can play out there, but I just thought,
McAteer.
yeah,
I
but
think they're fine.
I just thought
They might do
maybe one
it.
wide player, but it's not nothing's a pressing need for them.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe because they've got Doyle injured, haven't they? So I wonder if they'll get.
He is close to a return. I think. I think he's started
All right.
training now.
They won't need that
Yeah,
then. That'll
he's
be
he's
fine.
started training again, so I think they are even sorted on that front.
They've still got 4 or 5 goalies in their squad though,
Yeah,
so maybe get rid of
to be
them.
honest with them, it might be just a couple of outgoings just to
Yeah.
slim things down slightly. Middlesbrough.
Well, it's obvious it's right back,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I said right back and better injury luck, which you can't really buy in January, but I think right back is the obvious glaring one. It was probably a need even when they had Tommy Smith. It's certainly a need now. Some of these players are close to coming back, which I think will help them. Obviously, Riley McGree has just come back from injury. You've got Hackney, who I think is not too far away. Um, Left back, they seem to actually be doing all right now that Engel and Bangura are
Yeah,
both fit. Like
yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
centre mid, I think is all right. The attacking roles, I think that they were beginning to get something with the strikers, and then Latilaf got injured, and Force is still out, so that's a little bit of an issue for them. Whether they want to bring in another striker, I'm not sure. Maybe if they can get someone in on loan, just to take some of those minutes, that might be something they want to do. But yeah, right back seems pretty clear to me. Um, Millwall,
I struggled. I put centre mids, but they've got loads of centre mids, but I'm not sure they're centre mids that the new manager wants.
yeah. I had maybe a fullback. I don't think you can rely on Joe Bryan to stay fit, and then you're sort of one injury from Murray Wallace left back sort of thing, which he's fine out there, but you don't necessarily want to be doing that.
It might actually be centre back. They left themselves short with
Yeah.
centre back, I think.
But I think one defender, however you want to sort of look at that. I put a centre mid, and I put maybe a wide attacker. I'm not exactly sure how the new manager wants to play, but they're limited in options if he does want to play with wide players.
Just no
Um,
reaction, just a laugh from
yeah,
Angus on that one.
yeah. Um, I, uh, I don't have much more on him, uh, but yeah, I think you look at things like strikers and Fleming behind that in theory as well. I think it's just sort of it's tough. I think it just depends what the new manager really wants. I think he'll probably have a clear idea at this point. He's been there long enough. He'll have a clear idea at this point of what he needs to add, and um, they're generally quite good at looking to bring players in. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them do a bit of business. Norwich,
Centre back.
yeah. Just could have stopped at. I could have stopped at centre back. I put a couple of other options, but I could have stopped at centre back. It,
You're playing Kenny McLean there, who's done well, but
and Grant Hanley being back is not the solution to anything. Uh,
how did they end up with Gibson, Duffy, Danny Bath, and Hanley? Like, where's the pace?
they sold Omobamidele on deadline day at like 3 o'clock in the morning to Forest, and I'm not sure he's played since he went there.
Hasn't
Maybe they can bring him back on loan. But yeah, centre back is the obvious one. Um, I thought maybe another wide player, but I think they're all right in that area generally. Um,
Yeah, they are Fashionette, Hernandez,
the
Signs.
walking red card for science, or the walking red card waiting to happen. But yeah, I think it's one or two bodies in, and they'll be all right generally speaking. Plymouth,
I don't really know, but what I will say is I trust their recruitment.
yeah,
They're probably already sorted. I put centre back,
yeah,
but
that was the first one that came to mind for me. It's not even saying it's a glaring issue. I just thought maybe they could
yeah,
do a little bit better there.
maybe need a bit of experience, I think.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot that I was sort of like, oh, they have a need there. Um, maybe sort of another wide player um,
Yeah, I thought of that.
was the only other thing I could come up with. Preston,
I'm not really sure about Preston. Like,
um,
they're all right. They're all right, aren't they? Everywhere.
yeah.
Like,
Again, it's almost the sort of squad roles. I thought maybe one more wide player. I like Millar on the one side, but I'm not sure about the right hand side. I know Dwayne Holmes has done a decent job, but thought
yeah,
maybe that might help them in attack. Maybe someone with a bit more sort of creativity.
yeah. It's hard because they keep changing formation
Mm.
half the time. It's not ideal, is it?
But I think otherwise, there's a couple of positions I might have looked at where they've actually got some bodies there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like left back. They could put three players there,
yeah,
or it's like
so it's not too much of an issue. Just one or two additions, maybe another striker, because I'm still not convinced by Ched Evans coming off the bench. And at the times you want to play two up top, I guess it's sort of Ched Evans
you
or
know,
Will Keane.
when's oh, what's his name back? He's
Reese.
been out for
It keeps
yeah,
sliding, so that's where I'm just sort of like, maybe you need to add another player because it keeps sort
yeah.
of sliding back, which is fine. I'd rather they took the patient approach with it, but um, it might mean that for the rest of the season, maybe they need one more player in that position. QPR,
Centre mid.
yeah,
I think the way they're like similar to maybe Millwall, but they're trying to change the way they're playing. So I think probably a centre mid, isn't it?
yeah. I had a sort of few options with them. I think maybe one more centre back,
Yeah,
maybe one more wide player. I think they're slightly light in that area, and a goal scorer. As much as I like Lyndon Dykes, and everyone knows I like Lyndon Dykes, you've got Lyndon Dykes and you've got Sinclair Armstrong as the sort of secondary option, where it's like they could do with another sort of number 9.
yeah.
Um, Rotherham,
It's weird because I was looking at they've got a lot of players, but how many of them are at the level? I think is the hard thing. They can probably upgrade every area of their squads, but I put centre backs, they're just centre mid.
yeah, I mean, I know they've got a couple to come back in centre mid, which maybe would help. Like, if the likes of Cafu come back, that might be a
Yeah,
solution. The other thing I said for them is maybe another wide player, as in an attacker.
yeah. It depends what for me. Obviously, Anya Dimmer's injured,
Yeah,
who's their main wide player. Andre Green got injured.
yeah, exactly. It's because of the injuries where it's
Yeah,
just like they could do with another sort of, which is part of the reason they could do with another player in a few of these positions is just the
yeah,
injuries. But it's if they can just convince a little bit of quality to join them, would obviously make a big difference. Sheffield Wednesday,
striker.
yeah,
I think we've said all along defensively they've been all right.
yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
they
They've
need
been
to
they've been
score
quite good
goals.
under the new manager. It's just that goals element, like it's sort of like, oh, will Smith be back? Is Gregory available? It's like, can we do a bit better than this? Um, Now, obviously, the manager has some connections around. I'm not suggesting he's about to bring someone in from like Bayern Munich or whatever, but
I'm Munich third team or something.
yeah, but it might help them sort of get a player in. But I think that's the main one. Southampton,
Right winger.
yeah,
I know that Armstrong's doing all right whenever he plays there, but they didn't really replace Teller, did they? I don't think.
no. I thought they could do with one more wide player or a striker, like as in whichever way you want to play Armstrong. If you want to play Armstrong from the right,
Yeah.
ideally you need one more striker. If you want to play Armstrong striker, you need one. Ideally, need one more wide player. I've seen them linked with bringing Ahmad Diallo in. I think that would be an ideal solution for them.
I don't think he's going to be short of options lower down the Premier League or top Championship, is
Yeah,
he?
no, no, definitely not. So I think if they're able to do something like that, that's an obvious solution.
Diallo in that team is it's very interesting.
Diallo one side, Suleiman or Orodozi the other, Armstrong through the middle.
They'll get promoted if they have that front three.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, it was one more attacker, and I said maybe one more fullback, just because they've got Bree basically covering both sides. I'm not sure what the situation is with Larios, who was the other left back they had.
Yeah. Holgate sounds like he's going to be sent back. Who
which I
can
think,
cover right
yeah,
back?
which I think is probably
It's
the right
fine.
move. I think he probably needed to get them to the stage where Harwood Bellis was able to play and everything, but I think now he doesn't really have a use for them. But I think maybe one more fullback.
Yeah.
Stoke,
Goalkeeper.
yeah, I put goalkeeper in capital letters.
You're playing Bonham.
Bonham's done better than I expected. I will give him that. But
The bar was low.
yes. I do think that's the obvious error. Like they were obviously sort of hard done
They
by
could
in
do it.
terms of Travers getting recalled.
Yeah. They
Uh,
could do anything though, because he'll get backed. The owners will back
yeah,
him, I think.
but I think from the sounds of it, Schumacher is also quite happy with a lot of what he's got there. But which there's plenty of options. There's plenty of players there.
Set on a formation.
Yeah, but yeah, the goalkeeper seems like the obvious place for them to look. Sunderland,
Striker.
yeah, strike.
Sign a proper striker
I,
that's not 21.
I had striker in capital letters on this one
Yeah.
as well. I also said depending on their injury situation, one more fullback.
Yeah.
They've sort of
Yeah.
struggled, particularly with Huggins. Unfortunately, looks like he's going to be out injured for a while. I'm not sure on the exact situations with I know they've got Pembele back and they've got Sirki and Annalise, who I don't think are that far away, but it just feels like they could do with maybe one more body there with Huggins going down. Um, Swansea.
Struggled with Swansea.
Yeah, I thought maybe one more sort of just winger. It doesn't feel like they have a
Yeah.
lot of wide players. Where it's just like if you want, I know they brought in Yannick Bolasie, but if Yannick Bolasie is the solution, then that's probably an issue in itself. But it was sort of the one area I could think of, particularly. I thought maybe centre back, but they're getting Wood back. He's been back in the squad the last 2 or 3 games and that sort of
Yeah, it's
thing.
a good centre back.
Pedersen is coming back, so I was thinking, do they need another full back? But with Pedersen coming back as well, that gives them a little bit of depth. Maybe a right back, depending on what's going on with Ashby, because he's obviously been out for a little while, so it might be that they need another right back, but that's about it, really. Watford.
Goalkeeper. He's not good enough.
Who, Ben Hamer?
Even nah, Ben Hamer's not a number one. They need to get rid of Backman and get a proper
Yeah.
goalie, I think.
Uh, as a goalkeeper, right back. I know that they're keen on Andrews. I think Ngakia did decently, but Ngakia is also clearly one of these players who's going to pick up injuries. And he's clearly not comfortable playing sort of Andrews there regularly at this point. So I think they clearly
Yeah.
need to add someone there. Otherwise, I think they're generally in a decent position squad wise. So just a couple of spots there. West Brom.
Striker.
Yeah, although did see the other day Daryl DK back in full training.
I can't wait for him to be an option for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Everyone's going to be like, we need to give it a couple of weeks to make sure, and then he'll get injured again.
Yeah, he'll score like 3 and 2.
But yeah, I think it's just it's that. And then I said, possibly covering the fullback area
Yeah.
because it feels
Yeah.
slightly light there. But generally speaking, they're another one.
Pippa, haven't
You look through the squad and it's like it's not bad really. The other one I thought, particularly with Phillips being out for a while, was maybe another wide player, particularly with Diangana going to AFCON.
Yeah.
But it's not a lot for them. I think they're actually in a pretty good position. So that was just that's all the teams. That was just us sort of giving a rough idea of where we think teams are at, which I think also sort of helped me in my mind in terms of some teams that I thought actually they're not that badly situated. Obviously, depends a little bit on when how much that some teams have to spend and everything, which you can't quite know. But it's sort of what we're looking for from teams as well. I think is quite interesting. So in terms of other things from the game week, I know we both have this one, so I'm going to sort of start with it, which is Liam Millar for Preston against
Yeah.
Leeds. I thought he did very well. I think Archie Gray helped him a little bit. He's obviously sort of covering at right back, but I mean, even on the goal, it wasn't the first time in the game. He's almost showing Millar inside, which when he's a right footer on the left hand side, at a certain point, make him just show him line, almost over aggressively show him down the line. And like I say, he's young, he's covering out of position, but it's a little bit of like you should probably be able to figure that one out. But Millar is someone who has looked like he's got good quality for them, and I was impressed by him, and obviously he took the goal very well. Anything on Millar or someone else or another team or from this game week?
Just wanted your opinion on Ipswich over the last couple of games. Obviously, they've had two
Yeah.
hard fixtures, but this isn't a brag on me. I thought he got a bit outmanaged against Leeds. I think it was quite naive that he didn't change it when it was pretty obvious what the problem was. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I thought
uh,
the Leeds thing. I thought it was unfortunate that as well that it was almost perfectly suited to take advantage of what they do, particularly with Dan James on the right, where they vacate that space with Leif Davis for him to go up the pitch. It's almost
yeah,
literally one of the worst players you could have in the division to come up against that. Leif Davis obviously did not have a good game in that one, which doesn't help. An own goal where he doesn't even seem to realise the ball is coming across until it hits his shin, and then giving away the penalty. I'm not sure what he was adamant about it not being a penalty because it was clear as day that it was a penalty. But I thought they really struggled in that one. I'm not sure whether like Leeds seemed to come out with an intensity as well. Like they obviously had the extra ability, but they seemed to come out with an intensity that Ipswich didn't, which is quite surprising because Ipswich have matched or beat basically everyone for intensity this season, and they didn't quite seem to match up in that game. I thought they were much better against Leicester in this game.
they were, yeah. Although there was a couple of decisions that definitely went Ipswich's way.
Yeah. I've tried to
It's
sort
a
of be generous,
penalty.
but I do think it's a penalty on Dewsbury Hall. I think Burgess tries to go shoulder to shoulder with him, but ends up just barging him in the back.
And Harness should have
Yeah,
got sent off.
like I think particularly the way the ref had got at that point, and I'm not making any comments on the quality of the referee, but he was showing cards for that sort of challenge, and it was almost like he clocked that Harness was on a yellow and didn't book him. It was a stupid challenge to make on a yellow card, but
Yeah.
um, but I did think generally speaking they were better in that game.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. Like I said, it's not a problem for Leicester. They're going to go up, but
Yeah,
it's a good point for Ipswich. It's a
yeah,
better point for
particularly
Ipswich.
with Southampton on the charge, just picking something
Yeah.
up and yeah, so I think that was big for them. Um, I also wanted to mention Coventry. They laboured a little bit in that, but they did very well again. They're another team sort of on the move. Unfortunately for them, Sakamoto's the one who's gone big in this game, who will be going to the Asia Cup. I would assume, at least. I'm pretty sure he's going to the Asia Cup, which will obviously be a loss for them. But I think they are sort of generally speaking improving in that. And so yeah, it was just Casey Palmer's come off the bench and sort of got a return, and getting him back fit. they've got a little. It feels like they've got an increasing amount of depth now as well. So I think they're in a good position. And I think Sheffield Wednesday, albeit they're still one of the weaker teams in the division, it's still a good result to get a win against them at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I
then
don't have
I
too
just had a
much.
couple of sort of smaller takeaways, which was one, Jack Clarke is good.
I don't have him.
And neither do I. And it's just one of those things. I was talking about it this morning. You sort of end up in this little situation where there's like almost literally one odd player out, and it's almost literally in a trio of Mavididi, Clarke, and Rutter. It's almost literally that trio. Everyone will have like two of the three. It's like,
Yeah,
but you can't sell one of the two you've got to get the other one. You're just sort of you always just have to decide which two, and maybe it opens up at some point with someone sort of getting injured or something. But it feels like almost literally that trio is where you're making the sacrifice. And the other one was it happens at times with Rotherham, but seeing all the highlights from that game, I have no idea how Middlesbrough didn't score. What was it? I think 2 or 3 times hitting the woodwork. A couple of great a few great saves. It's just sort of like one of those days which seems to happen more to teams against Rotherham than anyone else, particularly Rotherham away. Um, Apart from that, not much else for me. I guess I'll just mention good signs for Stoke and uh, under Schumacher in that game.
yeah. I'm intrigued to see how well he does, and like I mentioned, sort of players he picks.
I thought Mai was very good in that game.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so that's sort of the rest of the game week. We've now got all your questions. We'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. It's not too bad at this point. We've gone just over an hour, so we'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. First question is from FPL Frog. Is there anyone we should keep an eye on at Southampton for Gaffr besides Carl Walker-Peters and Adam Armstrong? I can quite easily skip over this question just because, we did a whole section on it. James has said, yes, I've got a question. Could Dan please not mention Luton's 3-2 win against Sheffield United? Because I don't think I can bear it. Well, too late for that as well. It was already mentioned.
I had to mention it once.
FPL Remain. Best week to play Budget Buster. And who would you definitely want in for it?
Yeah.
Uh,
Feels like I played Budget Buster ages ago.
yeah. I probably wouldn't want to play it the next 2 game weeks just because it's this Friday and then next, I think it's Monday or Tuesday. So it's still in
Yeah,
that period of close fixtures together. I think after that, you've got 27, 28, and 30. I think all of them will work. I think the only players I'd definitely say at this point, I mean, you probably want some Ipswich depending on the week you play it. Like if you play it in 28 when they're away at Leicester, you don't want any Ipswich that week, but you might want an Ipswich forward otherwise. For example, if you play it in 30, they play Preston. You might want something in that. The only 2 players I can think of at the moment, I would say, yeah, definitely have them, is Azaz and Whittaker.
yeah. I think they're the key, aren't they? You have to play it with triple Ipswich though on a budget. You have to do it.
Which I think means I only had double because, of course, I didn't sacrifice Davis. I think that would probably
Oh
lead
yeah,
through
that's
to
true.
game week 30 with them playing Preston.
Yeah,
That week, Plymouth are away, but at Swansea, not the worst game for them. Um, maybe it's Huddersfield Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, I went all in defensively on the uh, Sheffield Wednesday QPR game for my budget buster. It didn't really work. But for example, defensively, do you look at the Huddersfield Sheffield Wednesday game and say, okay, that's the game I'm going to sort of target for it? So yeah, but 20, 27, 28, 30, and then it just sort of depends which players you want for it. Billy Hadaway, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, lads. Thank you, Billy. Same to you. Is Mavididi a priority buy now? And who would you say are the current top 5 mids to own?
Somerville, Dewsbury Hall, and as you mentioned, um, you'll probably have Mavididi or Clarke, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
And then
It's really hard.
just trying to think. Then you probably want someone in that slightly cheaper area, whether that's sort of one of the Southampton guys, O'Hare, Smodics. Like you probably want them in that
Azaz.
sort of area, maybe down to a Zaz. Um, so I think that's probably where you're looking, and then it just depends what.
Sarah's an option,
Yeah,
isn't he?
and then it depends what
Just
you're
keep
sort of
picks
looking
on.
for in other areas. Do you go down cheap to someone like Jonathan Rowe or Jordan James, or if you're going cheaper in another area, let's say you go without Rutter, can you then get an extra sort of higher priced midfielder sort of thing? But I mean, Somerville and Dewsbury Hall are the main two for me, and then one of Mavididi and Clarke
Yeah.
feel like the sort of obvious ones at this point. Now, Fairbrother, is it worth getting Rutter or Pirro back, or sticking with the trio of Armstrong, Chaplin, and Whittaker for now?
Well, I got Rutter back, so I guess I got to probably say get Rutter back.
I think this week I'd ride it out with Chaplin.
Yeah.
They have a nice home game. Leeds have a not great away game. They go away to West Brom. Ipswich are at home against QPR. Ipswich in home games tend to do well. So I think it's one of those things. It's not quite a cop out. It's sort of see how it goes at the weekend. It might be that sort of an injury happens or whatever, which makes your decision for you.
Yeah.
But I'd certainly keep Chaplin this week. Chaplin would be the one I'd be looking at potentially moving of the three. I'd still want Armstrong and Whittaker. But I'd see how you feel sort of after Friday's games. AD Tour, no question. Just thanks for the great content over this year, and hope you had a good Christmas. And wishing you both a happy New Year. Thank you, AD. I did. There was lots of food.
I was ill last year, so yeah, I mentioned to you I was really looking forward to the food.
Lee B has said, with one chip left from this set, what would you play in this scenario? Jeeps keeps in 25, Hazard and Begovic, or midfield dynamos in 26 with Somerville, Dewsbury Hall, Mavididi, Clarke, and Smodics. I mean, that game week 26 midfield dynamos does sound very good. We've sort of talked about Jeepers Keepers not necessarily being quite as good, particularly compared to midfield dynamos in a
In a
single.
single.
I know people have done decently on it in recent weeks, but it just makes me think that it could potentially be midfield dynamos. That week does stack up nicely. It's just worth sort of remembering it's the last fixture at the end of a sort of congested period. So it's whether you're sort of confident that there's not going to be any rotation there and that sort of thing. If you're comfortable with that, then by all means go for it. Because for the context, Blackburn are at home against Rotherham, Leeds are at home against Birmingham, Leicester are at home against Huddersfield, and Sunderland are at home against Preston. So in terms of fixtures,
That's a
those are pretty
very
good.
good week.
Yeah.
You can't get much better, I don't think.
Yeah. So yeah, part of it would just be see how, but I would prefer that over um, Hazard and Begovic on Jeepers keepers. Just looking at who they play, um, Southampton away and Ipswich away. Those could be saves, but it could also be they score like 4 goals on 6 shots on target or something, and it's sort of like, it feels a complete waste. Mark Dorney asked if Huggins was injured or suspended last game week. He's injured. I'm not sure if we've seen confirmation. I know the initial reports were that they thought he'd torn his ACL. I'm not sure if there's been confirmation on that, but I know that they were expecting it to. They said it didn't look good. Ollie said, "Let's get Jamie on the pod, please. It's Christmas. He's not got out to do."
Well, he had a good Boxing Day, apparently, didn't he?
Yeah,
Was it?
is just watching all the football. I think he enjoyed Leeds losing, so I'm not sure whether Ollie wants Jamie on the pod. I'm sure we'll manage to get him on at some point. We'll find sort of a period to get him on. We'll do sort of a Q&A pod with him, get him back for all his best takes on things like food and whatever else people want to ask, food and TV and whatever other sort of weird questions people want to throw out. Bears FPL said can get to this for follow the leader for game week 25 with a -4. Captain Adam Armstrong with Walker Peters and Manning, Vice Captain Broadhead, Davis and Chaplin, and emergency captain Dewsbury Hall with Pereira and Mavididi. Would you play it this game week, or would possible rotation be enough to put you off?
Probably play it with those players.
Hmm?
Broadhead got rested, didn't he? So
Yeah,
he's not. He's
Chaplin and Davis just play.
yeah.
Armstrong
I
just
think I'd
plays.
play it.
Every time I think Armstrong might get a game off, he just plays again.
Same with Walker Peters.
Walker Peters and Manning, well, Bree's not going to play, so you would assume that they're both going to play. And Dewsbury Hall, Pereira, and Mavididi.
They took Dewsbury Hall off.
Yeah, so Dewsbury Hall will play. I would assume Pereira will play. I know occasionally they do the whole Chowdhury comes in for Pereira thing. I don't know.
It's only them. I think I'd do it.
Yeah, like I mean, when I played it, I had just the 2 players on emergency, and it went great when it was just Whittaker and Azaz. So particularly on that one, it's lower stakes, so I'd probably go for it. FPL Maestro said, I'm yet to play Budget Buster and Follow the Leader. I'm currently planning to play Follow the Leader in Game Week 27 on Plymouth or Ipswich, Leicester and Leeds. Budget Buster in 30. Do you see an alternative chip plan that may be better with this team? Their boosts. But he's got his keepers are Hladky and Hermansen. I'm not sure why in the team he's sent he's benching Hermansen, but that's another matter entirely. Defenders are Furlong, Walker Peters, Davis, Britton, and Cannon. Midfielders Somerville, Smodics, Dewsbury Hall, Clarke, and Azaz. Forwards are Pirro, Chaplin, and Whittaker. I think I feel like we've talked about particularly Budget Buster and Follow the Lead a lot recently, and so it's not sort of like to disregard your question, but it's sort of like it seems perfectly viable. Like I think it's partially
Yeah.
about finding the best solutions that work in. I think for me, particularly in either 27, 28, or 30.
Yeah. Also, you're running out of game weeks. You've got 2 boosts. Like
Yeah.
you got to play them. So
I know there are a
yeah,
couple of other people that I've spoken to who are looking at playing Budget Buster in 30. I think it does work for it. So I have no problem with that and follow the leader. Yeah, it just sort of depends exactly how the fixtures line up, but it certainly seems fine to do that.
yeah.
Mel Stars, is Clarke essential? Would you reverse Rotter to Broadhead done this week to fund getting him back? It says follow the leader can be sorted later as not playing yet. Not for
No,
me.
I don't think not this week. I wouldn't do that. He's not essential, is he? I don't think Clarke.
No, I think it's one of those things where there's more players returning than we can get. There are
Yeah,
more good players than we can get, particularly in that midfield area. And so I think there's always going to be a feeling that you're like missing out on someone. Um, but I think, you have to think about the reasons that you've gone to get Rutter in this case. Like, I still think he's a good option. I think he's no less of a good option than before the Preston game, which was obviously shaped heavily by the goalkeeper getting sent off and everything. And, so I do think that it's worth bearing that in mind. If you sort of keep feeling like you really need Clarke back, then you can still do that. But I wouldn't sort of be rushing to, as Dan says, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh yeah, he's essential. And Carsten Stoveland, for the last question, he said, thank you for doing a great pod. Hard to find defenders for Budget Buster. Who,
oh,
yes,
yes,
agreed.
it is.
Saying, who do you recommend? I think part of the issue with this one is there is a little bit about, sort of, we've said before, about finding the best defenders for the week you're playing it.
Yeah,
Unless they have a terrible game, I would go with Famewo. He obviously did a little bit of a job for me, and he's one that is also good because you can just have him there the whole time. It's not a disaster if you have to play him because they're decent defensively. But and you've got a playing player at very cheap. Otherwise,
I
yeah,
went
it's
Matty
tough.
Pearson. That didn't work. That didn't work. Kessler Hayden, who I thought was a
Yeah,
pick for Plymouth, that didn't work.
Cannon, Steve Cook I had, and that went great.
It's just a minefield.
Yeah. So I think it really is. Like, I think QPR defense, depending on the week you're playing, it could work, but bear in mind it does rotate. Although Steve Cook is out with a minor injury at the moment, so depending on how long he's going to be out for, that might be a solution for you with one of the centre backs. But otherwise, yeah, it's tough. Maybe depending on the exact week, you go with someone like one of the Ipswich centre backs. If it's a decent week or if it's a not terrible week for Rotherham, maybe someone like Bramall, but I'm not sure there's many of them for Rotherham coming up. I think they've got quite a
Keith
rough run.
Keith if Swansea's 4-9.
Yeah.
He's not
Um,
terrible.
keep an eye on the Sunderland defensive situation, just in terms of who plays, because there
Yeah,
might be an option there, sort of in this period. But yeah, it really does sort of depend. Just pick it whichever week it
yeah,
is,
it was.
identifying sort of a couple of defenders, 2, 3 defenders, and just going for that.
Yeah, like it might be worth just maybe only going two defenders on Budget Bus and playing like Walker Peters or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think that there is an element of that. I think I had 3 budget defenders, but I didn't. I think it ended up with 2 of them because Steve Cook didn't. Oh no, Steve Cook got the playing
Like
zero, didn't he?
I get Kessler Hayden. I
Yeah.
had Pearson. It was a nightmare.
So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go overboard looking for them. 2 or 3, whichever week you play it. But yeah, so that's all the questions. Thank you all for listening. We have recorded Wednesday night. I will do my best to get it out Wednesday night because obviously the next game week is on Friday. I have.
4:30.
Is it a 4:30 deadline?
It's a 6 p.m. game, isn't it?
Southampton, Plymouth.
Yeah, so don't get caught out by that.
Yes, I probably would have, if not mentioned. So that is handy. The televised games are Southampton, Plymouth, and West Brom, Leeds. So if you are someone who likes basing your moves on being able to watch the players, those are the teams you're looking at. I'm not sure when we'll next pod, but we'll work that out. So yeah, thank you for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.